Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new World War II action movie, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So, World War II movies, kind of films, they come in many different varieties. Some showcase the incredible, moral courage of unsung heroes. Others explore more like the grim, hellish realities of war. But occasionally, some simply just show characters mowing down just a whole bunch of Nazi soldiers with machine guns while laughing, maniacally and, exchanging a bunch of quippy dialogue. And Guy Ritchie's The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare definitely falls quite firmly in the last of those categories, despite the fact that this movie does open up with a based on a true story title card. This is very much kind of a pulpy action flick, kind of in historical clothing. And while lacking, I think, any real depth or, emotion or heart, this film does offer some, I think, enjoyable action-packed entertainment. So director Guy Ritchie frequently makes Guy Ritchie films. His sort of distinctive style is kind of characterized by, snappy dialogue and quick camera cuts and just a lot of quirky characters. And I'll admit, it is a style that I often find myself enjoying. You can still find me on occasion, shouting from the rooftops that 2017's King Arthur Legend of the Sword is just a criminally underrated, enjoyable fantasy film. And with Ungentlemanly Warfare, really all the patented Guy Ritchie characteristics are present and accounted for. Although I did feel like the overall effect just feels kind of tired. It lacks some of the usual energy. Almost at times it feels like this is a movie that was made by someone else trying to make a Guy Ritchie film rather than feeling like the genuine thing. Which is not to say that this isn't an entertaining film. I think despite some of its shortcomings here or there, this is quite an enjoyable film. To the point that I almost feel like entertainment seems to be its sole purpose. I think this movie is like a popcorn flick, not only because it seems designed to be enjoyed while munching on that popular snack, but also because the movie itself almost has much in common with that kind of classic movie theater treat. I think popcorn is something that we more eat out of boredom than we do out of hunger. It lacks any real nutritional value. At the same time, it's not quite as bad as some of the other, junk food options available. I think kind of in a similar way, Ungentlemanly Warfare does feel largely like kind of empty entertainment that's more designed to to just sort of divert you rather than to really fill you up in any meaningful way. And I do think while this film does have some, maybe some notable content, like some kind of trivialized violence and the occasional profanity or sexual joke, it isn't brimming with just as much junk as you might expect from kind of, other, R-rated action flicks. And despite a 2-hour runtime, this film maintains a fairly brisk pace from start to finish, incorporating enough action scenes and just a really killer soundtrack to keep things interesting. It sort of doesn't waste a whole lot of time. It quickly establishes the characters and sends them off on this mission, and kind of from then it kind of keeps the foot on the gas till the conclusion. And Henry Cavill, he just has enough kind of leading man charisma to carry a film like this, even if his character is left mostly undeveloped. And I would say, just sort of in general, really none of the characters in this movie have any real depth beyond sort of their defining role on this team. For example, Alan Ritchson, who's kind of been in a lot of things lately, is sort of he's the forceful brute strength that just enjoys killing people. It sort of alludes to his simple backstory, is mentioned near the beginning, but really all audiences need to know for this is, hey, he's the big dude that kills Nazis with a bow and arrow, and he's joined by the strategy guy or the explosives guy and so on, and they're all fun, and their banter as a group is fun, but they're all largely interchangeable and essentially given all the same backstories of, hey, Nazis killed someone that they care about, that they love, and now they want to kill Nazis, and there's really not a whole lot more to their characters than that. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this thing, for language, I counted at least 2 F-bombs, as well as just sort of a handful of other profanities. And kind of in addition, I think God and Jesus are each used at least once as well. Violence, this is where the most content comes from, as you might expect, because there's a staggeringly high death count of Nazi soldiers, and many of these victims are shot in various locations, including the head, or else killed by an arrow, or hacked and slashed by, a knife or, an axe. And while I wouldn't say that this is like a gore fest, it's not just over the top, gratuitous violence. There is blood from this, and the implied violence is quite gruesome. Where you do have blood kind of coming out of wounds and kind of pulsing out of slit throats. And probably the most extreme case of violence in this is there is a character that uses a knife to cut out the heart of an enemy character. And like, the actual cutting is not depicted on screen, although as the audience you do see him holding that heart. As far as sexuality, there's a little bit going on for that as well. It is implied perhaps that one of these characters is gay, although it is left slightly ambiguous whether the men are like in earnest or if they're just joking. But sort of in that conversation, kind of regarding another man, this character does make a very crude remark about becoming aroused. And kind of another female character in this wears quite a revealing, kind of skin revealing dress with the purpose of seducing a man, and that man kind of repeatedly expresses his desire to bring her back to his private quarters to have a party with very clear sexual insinuations. And one other visual, which isn't depicted like in a sexualized way, but there is like a shackled prisoner that's sort of hanging by their arms that does seem to be naked and is sort of briefly visible from behind. And the only other kind of content stuff is there is plenty of smoking and alcohol consumption kind of at various points in this film. As far as things going on beneath the surface of this, there is sort of a subtext throughout of kind of about racism and discrimination towards both Black and Jewish characters. But I'll admit that kind of finding any beneath the surface themes or ideologies in this film is somewhat difficult, because this isn't a film that I think is designed to probe any of these deeper themes or ideas. And I think kind of at risk of attempting to overly sermonize a very pulpy action flick, I do think one of the things that does kind of rise to the surface is that I think perhaps the protagonist, their greatest virtue in this film is their willingness to kind of make sacrifices and kind of without hope of personal rewards or recognition. Although, admittedly, their motivations are somewhat muddied. It is kind of left a bit open-ended whether they persevere on this seemingly impossible mission for the good of England and the world, or merely due to just sort of a personal vendetta against the Nazis. But when they do complete this mission and they are confronted with jail time rather than a reward or praise, a bystander kind of comments to Henry Cavill's character, remarking that it seems they're not going to be as fondly remembered in history as they deserve, which leads Cavill's character to respond, "I don't think that's what any of us were in this for, from the beginning." And I think kind of despite their pivotal role in this war effort, they do remain kind of unsung, unpraised, and yet are ultimately satisfied with the good that that they were able to accomplish, which just I think echoes in the Bible. Jesus clearly condemned the people that did good deeds but were motivated primarily by the desire to be praised and recognized, and kind of instead he urged his followers to act privately without hope or the necessity of like earthly rewards, like Matthew 6:1-6, where it says the Father that sees you in secret will reward you. Maybe one other thing about this film is I think kind of just a theme of like cathartic violence. Like I know director Quentin Tarantino has often spoken about cathartic violence and how violent movies sort of allow viewers to purge these violent emotions in a controlled setting. And obviously other people disagree with that and kind of argue that sort of supersized doses of hyper violence are kind of desensitizing at best or radicalizing at worst. And this is a debate that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and the theater. And obviously we don't have time to wade into trying to give a verdict on that debate. Only to say that this film does seem to line up a lot more with like Tarantino's way of thinking, where really the good guys in this film arguably showcase more like brutality and violence than even their enemies do, but because such violence is being reaped upon the bad guys, and you know, it's depicted as a very crowd pleasing spectacle, which almost invites kind of audiences to like similarly take glee in the misfortune and kind of grisly end of these, nameless Nazi soldiers. So kind of in the end, I don't think all movies are, have to be very deeply moving or probe any kind of complex themes or ideologies. Sometimes films can exist merely to entertain people for a few hours, and the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, it's not a complex film. I'm not even entirely sure it's a very good film, but what it does do is it offers some kind of diverting fun and entertainment. I do think sort of the violence as spectacle approach may give some Christians, cause for concern, but I do think this movie is one that is almost refreshing in its simplicity. It doesn't get bogged down trying to be really anything more than just a simple, fun, entertaining action flick. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this movie, if you enjoyed the lighthearted tone and kind of the more pulpy element, or if you were maybe turned off by just the way it maybe trivializes violence, whatever you think about it, jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about that. If you haven't answered to, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider, lots of other movie reviews and interviews and a podcast and just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with the world for Christ.